ladies and gentlemen, you are more than welcome to another episode of the Coffee at 11 show. This is episode 71 of the Coffee at 11 show, brought to you by wigwam.ie, SME peer support. Delighted to have you here, rainy Monday morning here in Ireland. And delighted in particular to have my special guest here this morning, a lady that I met some years back and reconnected with very recently. Lovely to have you here. Harriet McGuigan, you're very welcome. Please come in and show us your glass of water or your cup of coffee, whatever you have. Thank you. And say hello.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much for having me at your Coffee at 11.
It's indeed our pleasure. So let me just tell you a little bit about Harriet before I bring the lady in herself, if that's okay. So Harriet McGuigan, sole trader based out of the Kingdom, County Kerry, close to Tralee. She's a psychotherapist and she works one-on-one with clients face-to-face on the line and online. She visits businesses running mindful programs for bosses and employees, educating people in how you live your day is how you run your business. I love that. How you live your day is how you run your business. She's also spoken to business women, along with Carla Henry from Operation Transformation, on how getting help on tailoring your self-care needs leads to more sales and longevity in business. In conjunction with this, she's worked with adolescents for the last 4 years in a large boys' school in Kerry and in a youth outreach centre as a therapist based in Dingle. And she also runs, love this, Raising Resilient Páisti Workshops. Kathy Mera, Páisti is the Gaelic word for children. So running Resilient Páisti Workshops, mindful teen/tween workshops throughout the country. She has spoken as a guest lecturer in the Limerick Institute of Technology and the Social Studies Programme, has been involved with the University of Limerick Human Doctor Programme on many occasions for medical students, and her experience will help you grow yourself up, love that, and learn how some unhealed childhood wounds can be an obstacle to you making good, profitable, sound business decisions. And on top of that, Harriet speaks every Sunday evening, 9:30 p.m. on her Harriet McGuigan Psychotherapy Facebook page on all things mindful, and you'll be guided through a body scan most Sundays. And she says that's a great way to finish off your week and face your Monday. And then despite all that, wait to hear this, something people don't know about her, I'm an introvert. I'm an introvert and I like my company, my own company, a lot, in capitals. Harriet, you're more than welcome. Thank you for joining us. In your own words, Harriet, please, will you take us all the way back? You spoke to us just before the show, said you're from Limerick, a Limerick girl originally. Bring us up through those early years, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so even listening to that, I was, saying that I help people about the imposter syndrome, that part that we all have, because I was like, did I really do all that? Even though I have, but like, that's what happens us as humans, we can achieve a huge amount, but there's always going to be a part kind of going, oh, the next time I do it, I'll be found out. And that's normal. But it was just interesting. I was like, wow, that person sounds amazing. And then I was kind of having to go, okay, you've done that. You've been there. You do that. So yeah, I'm from Galbally, County Limerick. Very proud to be from Galbally, so near Tipperary town. Most Limerick city people, when I grew up, would be like, where's Galbally? They would know. We're East Limerick, so it wouldn't be relevant. You don't drive through Galbally. Near Mitchelstown as well. So grew up in the Golden Vale. Father is a butcher, retired, but I grew up in a business, in him running a very successful butchering business. And so I suppose I was around how to be autonomous from a very young age and seeing what he did and how he built something in the 80s when things were very tough. And I suppose from 13 onwards, I went to boarding school in the Ursuline Convent in Thurles. So from 13 onwards, I've kind of lived away from Galbally permanently. But I mean, my graw would be like all of us. I'm in Kerry now 5 years. I actually need to look at the camera, don't I? I'm looking at Colm, so I don't know where to look. What's the right thing to do? So I suppose. I'm in Kerry 5 years, but wherever we come from is our kind of bone marrow. It's like it's through our nervous system. Colm mentions many times he's a dub, and you're in Limerick probably a long time. But it's like, I suppose some of our life experiences are very positive, and there's trauma for all of us. But I guess what I'm interested in is the more we practice meditation and really find out who we are, we can remember the better stuff much stronger than the challenging experiences, because again, every human, no matter whether we're Richard Branson or, born into huge poverty or get out of poverty, we just being alive is a trauma, really. So yeah, so that's.
Thank you for that. And by the way, you can look wherever you wish. I find myself, I always look at my guest I use this gallery view, so a little box there in the middle, and somebody's going to shift around later, and I'll be looking over here when you shift, so it's fine. But so wherever you're comfortable is absolutely fine. But listen, thanks for that. That just gives us a lovely picture of those early years. I love what you said. You know, it's in our bone marrow. You're a proud East Limerick woman, Galbally, and I was making notes here about your dad, the butcher, running his autonomous business back in the 80s when things were very tough here in Ireland. So huge lessons in there that we sort of, children absorb by osmosis. They see what's happening around them, and it's stuff that you can't learn in books. And then 13 on, you went to the convent. Sarah Ward came to mind because Sarah admitted on the show here that the nuns didn't really want Sarah around, let's be honest, right? And anyway, we'll move swiftly on. We'll edit that piece out too. My apologies, Sarah. So look, so the 13 into the convent. How did you get into your career? What was your early career? What were those first?
I've done a lot of things, and it's all built up to going to where I am now. So basically, very smart in school. However, I suppose my parents separated at the time, so it had a huge impact on me in terms of concentrating academically. Didn't really realize that. Well, I probably did, but so basically for my leaving cert, I didn't achieve what I could have achieved. Would have got kind of straight A junior cert, and from junior cert to leaving cert, just was very distracted, a lot of messing, very into theatre, drama, but just didn't stick at the books. Passed my leaving cert, but didn't get what I knew I could have achieved. But again, that's all part of the journey, isn't it, for all of us? So I suppose I went to Dublin Business School, like it was LSB at the time. It's now called Dublin Business School. I can't even think of what the abbreviation is. So I did tourism studies, business and tourism. Basically, I wanted to go to Dublin. I just wanted to go with my friends to Dublin. So I got offered something in Donegal, but I was like, I'm not going to Donegal. Like, what, you know, that was just where I was at the time. Just very much kind of whatever people needed me to be, I tried to clone into. So basically, I did business and tourism, and then I have my green on. I was a cabin crew with Aer Lingus when I joined at 21. And from there on, I suppose I started to really get interested. I worked for Chylan as a volunteer, and I just got really, really fascinated with how we are as humans, how we are as parents, how we are interacting with each other. I would have had a lot of experiences with feeling bullied, but I started to realize, and this would have been earlier as well, but I started to realize not that it's okay that anyone is bullied, but I started to realize that there was something in me that was attracting how I was being treated. So I started to get, that's why I'm really interested in Raising Resilient Páisti, helping people at work to empower themselves and actually that they can have their own strength, that the bullies just move on then. And, you know, we have a lot of talk at the moment about bullying. Yeah, and it's everywhere. It doesn't, it's like, it's not really that the bully is a baddie and the person being bullied is a goodie. It's just sometimes we trigger each other. And
I'll touch on that if I may, because Jenny Lazar is here in the audience with us. Jenny, you're very welcome. Jenny was a guest on the show some weeks back. Jenny and I met last year when I was delighted to be invited to her TEDx Dunleary, and I did a talk on bullying. And it was a talk on a boy called Stephen. It was basically Stephen's story. And Stephen is my son. And we got through that talk by exploring the reality that I believe in. I think you just alluded to it, that self-esteem, you know, there's something within somebody, as you say, that would allow a bully pick on them for whatever reason. So it's not, as you say, not necessarily the bully is bad or the person being bullied is good, not necessarily so. But there's a dynamic going on there. And it was only when, in Stephen's case, when Stephen's self-esteem got to the point where he felt good enough, dare I say it, that the bullying stopped effectively. So are we on the same page here?
100%. Yeah, you just repeated what, yeah. And I suppose because when we're in, like I always say, and I say it to every child that I meet and every adult, it isn't okay what happened. You know, the mean things that happened like that, there's no excuse for that. But I suppose if we just get stuck in, I've been a victim in my life, they're bad, they have more power over me, it's kind of like then the cycle is never going to change. It's a bit like in the jungle when the lion is looking for food, they look for the gazelle who's limping. They'll watch the pack and they'll look for the gazelle who isn't just in full form. So there's something that is it if we're being bullied continuously or feeling, sometimes bullying can be very covert, you know, it's not necessarily the full on someone screaming at you. It can be just sly comments or, you know, just that you feel that like it can be hidden kind of, like nobody else even notices it's going on. So you're at work and nobody could point out that Harriet has been picked on, but you know, it's like your gut feeling. That's why I love teaching people to get in touch with their gut feeling. We always know what our gut feeling is about things, but often we're trying to people please or we're trying to, you know, run away from our gut. So usually we'll always know if someone says something to us that makes us feel uncomfortable. They mightn't do it intentionally, but I suppose it's just for us to be mindful that, okay, is this a good choice for me? Is this right for me? In terms of even when you're interviewing people or just having your checking who's right for you to clean your house, if that's what, you know, it's all in relative to what our life is. So for children, it's, you know, trying to teach them, like when I go into speaking with children, do you want to be part of that WhatsApp group? What does your gut feel about it? You know, so it's all, everything is all relative to what age we are, but everything is as important, because sometimes as adults, we can kind of minimize children's experiences because if we've minimized our own. And it just comes from, that's why I'm into helping us grow up, because the more we acknowledge ourselves, then the more then we'll be able to just hear people have to say. A bit like, I couldn't believe that that's the song when I was getting ready, Dublin could be heaven, a coffee at 11, you know, it's like we can be so tuned in as humans to each other when we get past the bullshit in our heads, excuse my language, but you know, get past the mess and the ego and the what should I do, because you know we all have that as well, that imposter syndrome thing.
Mary, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm loving the way where this conversation is going on. This Buddha bus came from Sweden straight away there. Lovely to have this conversation, and I'm excited to see where it'll weave. Before we go deeper into it, though, I'm very curious. You know, you admitted to running to Dublin because you wanted to get to Dublin. You sort of picked up any course that was going, and it was the Dublin Business School, or what's now the Dublin Business School. So from there, how did you get into Aer Lingus cabin crew, and how did you get from Aer Lingus cabin crew to working with Resilient Páisti?
Yeah, so basically I decided to go back. No, I actually from Aer Lingus, I unfortunately had some health problems and I wasn't able to work as cabin crew because I need to be on my feet all the time. So I ended up becoming a PA to the chief executive of the Irish Property Trust. So it used to be Irish IFPUT. So they owned, like they managed people's pensions like Guinness and Aer Lingus. And so basically I got in there and it was definitely imposter syndrome. It was like, you know, the movie Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. Basically I got in with a mixture of just my personality and, you know, I can do this. Like I had done a bit of typing stuff with college, but like I was basically working for these 5 execs and had to totally learn on the day, like with, you know, you'd get the dictaphone typing. Like I'm really quick at typing now, but it was complete just like, and it was a really well-paid job. I had a car space on Leeson Street. I like was earning really good money, but I mean, I was bored out of my tree personally for me. You know, I just like, it's like that thing of you can be earning good money, but I just was kind of slowly dying inside and I just felt very loyal. They were fabulous to me. I mean, when I left, they paid for me to go back to college. They gave me enough money that I could spend on, I went back and did Montessori education. So that was my vision, that I wanted to work with children. And I suppose I was just very interested in if we can help children to be confident in themselves, then we're going to get the confident adults and we're not going to have the bullying presidents and the, you know, the adults that are throwing their dummies out of the pram, because that's, my opinion, is where all these adults come from that are quite difficult to work with and they just don't listen to anyone and, you know, very, I know best. So that was my vision. And then I worked in a very disadvantaged part of Dublin, totally fell in love with it. The kids totally fell in love with me. We had an amazing time, but I got interested in that it was their trauma. That was why they weren't learning, because I knew from my own history as well. I knew it wasn't that I knew they were smart. I knew they were beyond smart, very street savvy. I knew they were kind, but I knew that their trauma and the distractions at home, I didn't have any of the psychological information. I just was going with my gut. I knew that they were just trapped in their lives. So I treated them with complete respect. They treated me with complete respect. I'll never forget that experience. That was my total catalyst then to spending about 10 years studying what I studied, you know, just, yeah.
Ah, lovely, lovely, just beautiful, just beautiful. For those of our international guests that are here this morning, you know, what Harriet has just described there, you know, in sort of corporate world, having a car parking space on Leeson Street is at the upper end, right, of what one might achieve, certainly back in the day in Dublin. And by her own admission, bored out of her tree, earned the big bucks, had the fancy car space, etc., and then gave it up to follow your passion, and then went straight to the opposite end of the spectrum here in Ireland. And that's one of the most disadvantaged areas in Dublin, and follow the passion. And we've spoken about this several times on the show, Harriet, about the ovarian lottery, that, you know, we're born into circumstances entirely beyond our control, into family situations entirely beyond our control, and we must work from there. And regrettably, a lot of people are trapped in their environment, and because nobody's come into their environment, show them there's a different way, they end up spending their whole lives in a particular environment. So so hats off to you, boolabus to you for stepping into their environment and beginning to show them the way. And the other thing I'm just going to touch on is this imposter syndrome. You said it a few times, came up a couple of times as well on the show. I remember going to UL to a lecture, and it was a young woman, I imagine in her 30s, but she's heading up Disney here in Ireland, and she's from Limerick. She's from Dylan Field in Limerick. And she said she lived by that imposter syndrome. She was saying, seriously, they're going to walk through the door and realize I'm making this stuff up, right? But she was just flooded with talent, as you are. But we've all had that occasion where we've suffered from imposter syndrome. I shouldn't be here. And the reality is the universe wanted you where you are now. And so the journey begins. Right, move on. This is exciting, please.
Yeah, so so basically, I suppose I moved with my husband, my partner at the time, who, you know, Keith, to Australia. So basically he had finished his chartered accountancy exams, and most people were putting deposits on houses, and we just blew all the money on traveling. We just decided we wanted to travel and spend the money that way. And that was supposed to be my kind of, I suppose, you know, that I would feel better about myself. I'd done the Hoffman process. I don't know if any of you heard of it. It's an 8-day residential course that's quite expensive, and I kind of thought that doing that would have been my get out of jail card. So it's about 3,000 or something, but like I was very like, okay, this is going to be like the icing on the cake. I'll just be happily ever after once I do that. It was amazing. It was definitely worth doing, but of course it was only the beginning of unraveling, and I'm still unraveling what I need to unravel. That was 2003 maybe. So what are we now? 2020. So basically over in Sydney, over in Australia, did South America, did all the traveling, started to get really, really kind of, I suppose I've never been diagnosed, you know, in terms of medically or anything, but like very, really struggling with myself and not being able to be in the present moment, in Iguazu Falls, in cycling down the world's most dangerous road, you know, swimming with pink dolphins, but just not able to be in the moment, riddled with anxiety, giving my husband, my partner, a hard time as well. Obviously he sees a lot, like it's like all of us, you know, we have our struggles, but of course everyone else sees a lot more about us than what we see. You know, when we're struggling with the imposter syndrome or the anxiety, other people see all the lovely bits of us, like Colm's sharing or Anne, or, you know, so I suppose he was fine about me, but I just was really not fine about myself. So when we got to Sydney, I decided that I wanted to go back studying. I didn't plan to go traveling and start studying, but I just knew in my gut, because that's like when I contacted LinkedIn with Colm, there's a part of me that often when I need to do things, I just have to do them, even though I'm scared out of my life. It's like bungee jumping without a rope. So basically I got into the course when I wasn't supposed to get into it, but they were like, okay, you've really, there's something that we want to give you a chance about, because I started mid-year. So I basically finished that course in Ireland. I had to come back, had my children, brought them on the course with me, breastfeeding them. My son twice came on the course because I was that determined to finish the course, because I suppose it's like I knew I was much more than the imposter syndrome as well. So basically finished that course, and since 2013 I've worked in the University of Limerick as a therapist with students, from engineering students, medical students, art students. I've also worked in the Human Doctor program with Declan Ahern, trying to help doctors to be compassionate about how they give people information about diagnosis, that they're not just because sometimes doctors themselves would admit that they get really excited about something unusual, but they don't think this is this is huge news for the person. So teaching them all about mindfulness and the benefit of it. And so basically my business was quite thriving in Limerick as a therapist. So we moved back. We didn't move back. The universe was meant to send us to Kerry. My husband started working with Kerry Group. He had set up a business that didn't, it's not that it's again like fail better the next time. It just obviously wasn't meant to be. He got huge experience from it. He's now working for an entrepreneur and he's his right-hand man. So my husband's experience of his business it's like what I'm trying to get you all to know. Everything we do in life is our stepping stone to the next thing. It's like nothing is a mistake. Fail better the next time. It's like that whole adage of just get up. Children that learn how to walk, they don't go, oh God, I better stop doing that. I look really awkward. God, I'm not ever good. They just do it. And we all have that. Like, what child doesn't keep going to try and walk? Obviously, unless there's additional needs or something like that. But that's what we all have, that huge resilience.
Of course. Listen, Bula Bus, and thank you for going there. Thank you for sharing that journey and sharing your vulnerability in it. I've always said to our guests, I often say to our guests that we can Google your business. We can, we can look up your Facebook page. We can look up your website. But it's getting to know you is what we're trying to do here, and really appreciate you going there and being vulnerable, because in you doing that, perhaps there's somebody in the cafe is saying, do you know what, she's speaking to me today, or perhaps it'll be somebody on the replay. So thank you, Harriet. Bula Bus, to you and your journey. You described the imposter syndrome beautifully, and it seems to have followed you all those years. I mean, swimming with pink dolphins, and by your own admission, not being able to be present because of some strange anxiety that was there. So my goodness, well done you. Absolutely, the universe needs you where you are and the work you're doing at this moment in time. Are you over the imposter syndrome?
No, I think a bit like COVID is still here. I just live with the imposter syndrome, but like it's actually more peaceful for me to nearly accept that that's always going to be something that it's just a little vulnerability. Like if someone maybe has diabetes, or if they're gluten intolerant, it's something I live along with. But I suppose that's what I teach people as well. I have tools, so I can wake up on a Monday morning, similar to those feelings of being really down when I'm going to swim with pink dolphins, but I do my meditation. I make sure I get out for a walk. I make sure I have my smoothie. I sometimes have to fake it till I make it. So some days, that's what would have been my fantasy before I started to find out about myself. It was, I'll feel amazing all the time. I'll just feel like happily ever after. It'll be like the Walt Disney movies. But I suppose I've made my own Walt Disney movie because I have my own resilience to keep climbing. Like last Friday when Mary Fitzgerald was saying they climbed the hill, the way they were talking about that when lockdown happened. So I suppose it's like I just keep going, and I have more memories now. It's like we know from neuroscience, I have more memories of, you'll get through this will pass, So I can't say that I've gotten through it. I suppose I have it with me. And it doesn't stop me. It definitely doesn't stop me.
Bula Bus, it definitely doesn't stop you. And thank you for coming here today and sharing the story. This obviously by your own, by listening to you, this obviously itself is a bit of a stretch for you, or perhaps was prior to coming on the show. May I ask, if you don't mind, without getting into the detail, you mentioned you brought your children on those early courses, the Hoffman course. How have they been?
My Gestalt training.
Forgive me, your Gestalt training. So how has that impacted them? I know they were very young at the time, but do you see a difference?
So Ollie was 3 weeks old when he came first time. Tessa is my oldest daughter. She's 13, so I brought her when she was 4 months old, and my friend came over from London actually to mind her for the week, and I was breastfeeding her. Yeah, like it hasn't been all rosy. Again, that was a fantasy as well about becoming a mother, that, oh my God, I'll do all this work on myself. It wasn't a bed of roses, but I suppose, again, like learning from all the experiences, we're very resilient as humans. So to be honest, when I became a mother, the anxiety got even stronger than even before I was a mother, just about like how responsible I was for these humans, so aware of like how my trauma was getting in the way and, you know, things that I hadn't worked through. So, you know, there were a lot of moments that I wasn't very proud of and that I could have really, I suppose that's why I'm good with helping mothers, because I'm very compassionate, that I could have been very, very down on myself about. But I suppose it was all to do with the learning of what wasn't healed. They're very well today. They have their journeys. You talk about your son being bullied. They've had those experiences as well. So, but they're okay. They're good humans, you know. And I'm a good mum. I'm a good enough mum, you know.
Beautiful. I love that. I'm a good mum. I'm a good enough mum. And yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, no, yes, you are. Yes, you are. This again has come up. It's been really interesting to see the themes recurring on the show over the last number of months. And it really is, all we need to be is enough. That's all we need to be. And we need to realize that we are enough. The fact that the universe, the Lord, whatever way you want to describe it, put us here. We are enough, and we've got a certain role to play. And it would appear that yours wasn't in Aer Lingus cabin crew, and it wasn't in financial services or property, whatever it was, the corporate world. It is exactly where you are now. So are you absolutely passionate about the work you do now?
1,000,000,000%, like off the radar. And I'm passionate because, like, from the top level of like what's going on in the States, Black Lives Matter, and you know, all the other stuff that's going on, but it's like if we respect that our life matters, then I suppose we can help with racism and Indigenous communities and children. And, you know, I suppose the more we, like when I go into schools, I'll sit with like 15, 14-year-olds that are just like, what the hell is she? And why the hell do we have to listen to this old lady? And I forget that I'm old, because like in my head, I feel very young, but you know, I'm ancient. And they're just they're forced into having to listen to a mindfulness class. Can you just imagine, picture being 14, you want to go on your phone, you want to message people, you're just like, oh God, like, and mostly, and I've done this for a good few years, 99.9% of them will give feedback that was absolutely, they just got so much out of it. I've often got standing ovations from them from at the start when they've been like, oh my God, you're a head wreck. Because I talk their level. I tell them how much of a cow I was at times when I was 14, or how mean I was to other girls, or, you know, because I wasn't happy in myself. I'll tell them about times when I've been bullied, and then they want to hear what I have to say, and then they'll tell me about their struggles with trying to understand how to navigate teen life, and they'll open up and they'll feel better about themselves. Ultimately, why I do it all is the less critical any of us are of ourselves, then we're less of a nightmare in the world. All the people that are cranky that you bump into every day, I know it's of course we allow ourselves our anger, but if you're mean to someone, you're not happy in yourself. They're either jealous of you, or they just hate their job, or they hate who they're with. You know, they're not happy at home. There's always something. You just don't go out to a stranger and act mean to them.
Really well said. Yeah, thank you, Sarah Ward, that lovely Bulabus. That was gorgeous. I'm, 1,000,000% passionate about what I do, and I love the fact that you went in and admitted to these 14, 15-year-olds that I was a cow too back in the day. But a great way of winning them over. A great way of winning them over, and of course you want to win them over only for the right reasons, so that they'll listen to what you're going to say, and hopefully it'll impact on their behaviors as they move forward. I also came across or developed a theory some years back that the likes of alcoholism, now this is without, I'm ignoring any possible underlying medical condition or drug addiction or any of that type of stuff, or self-harm, there has to be a deep self-loathing. This is my layman's view. There has to be a deep self-loathing there that would allow somebody to abuse themselves in such a way for whatever reason. Is that a fair comment or an unfair comment? And I don't mind.
That's a total psychotherapist answer. That's like so knowledgeable. That's it. And it's the self-loathing as well. Would be mean to someone. If we like ourselves, we wouldn't hurt a fly. It's always back to self-hatred, self-loathing. And absolutely, alcoholism is a form of self-harm. Smoking, like extreme smoking, vaping, shopping addiction, pornography, anything like that. Behind the whole thing is the self-loathing and the not being able to manage anxiety, not being able to cope with the imposter syndrome and not having tools, and it's not as simple as that. And like what you said, Colm, there's medical and there's hereditary there's different, you know, I'm talking about kind of, I call plump neurotic. A lot of us are plump neurotics. My dad was laughing when I gave him that name. So a plump, like, because we're all, I suppose, have an ego. And what I mean by that is none of us are perfect. We're perfectly imperfect. That's my quote, all of us. So I suppose the more ease we have about being perfectly imperfect, like when this morning, my Wi-Fi is never down. I did a course in New York last week, and and then Wi-Fi isn't working, and you know, I could start getting really critical of myself. And it's like mindfulness is just going, okay, can you show up now? Like what Eamon said this morning, like how you show up in your day is how you show up in your business. How you show up in yourself is how you show up with your children. Like I posted yesterday, and there was huge interaction. If you wouldn't say it to your daughter, don't say it to yourself. And there was a picture of a mother and a daughter, you know? So it's like, I often have mums saying, my daughter's really bad self-esteem, and and she's so gorgeous, and it's gently trying to, and how are you about yourself? Oh, well, I'm desperate, and sure, I'm past it, and all this. And it's like, that's what she's breathing in. And it's not to attack ourselves, because we're all critical, especially as Irish people, and I mean, I work with people and have friends internationally. That's sadly something that we kind of do in our lives when we're young. So we come in full of life, and we want to walk, and we keep walking. We don't get embarrassed. Do you ever see an embarrassed child about walking? They don't get embarrassed. They just keep doing it. You know, they don't go, oh God, I'm a bit of an imposter, and people are looking at me, and what will they think? They don't care. They just want to walk. Toddlers do you ever see a toddler in a supermarket? They stick their chest out and they waddle down. They don't go, oh my God, what will people think of me? And they'll think I'm too full of myself, and they'll think that all gets layered on through school. Sometimes a lot of trauma with school. I remember things people said to me in school that the teacher, God love her, one of them has passed away. I know she didn't mean to be mean. She didn't mean to be mean, but she was mean, because now I think it was a mixture of she didn't have her own children, so she was angry about all of us, all these gorgeous little innocent beings in front of her. So she used to, the stuff she said, and I know loads of you from I mean, my father, like, has the stories he tells us, he breaks down in tears. So, you know, even our generation wasn't as bad, but that's a trauma. That we carry that with us. That's our imposter thing then. So suddenly, if a teacher says you'll amount to nothing, and then you're up speaking in front of 500 people, but you remember Miss whatever saying that you're not going to get past the front gate, that hits you unless you've tools, you know? So we have a lot of power as teachers.
We do indeed. Those few words can affect somebody's life for the better or for the worse forever. I often allude to the teaching profession as being 100-year work, because you know, if we can impact a child in a positive way, let's imagine some child has have negative role models at home, let's say, right? But they bump into somebody like you at age 14, and you spark something in their little head, and they say, maybe I am okay, and they begin to find these tools and begin to work on themselves. Well, then their predestiny was here, let's say, because of their background. They bump into somebody like you or anybody here in the room, and a little universal bump in the road, right? And all of a sudden they begin on a slightly different path. Does that make sense? Yeah. And 25 years later, when they're starting their family, their children start out here, and it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. The gap gets wider over 100 years. So I consider it to be 100-year work. Fantastic stuff. You're doing lovely work.
Thank you for translating what I do, because that's a problem for me sometimes to actually translate, because I just do it, you know, I just go into the room. But it is really important to be able to translate it. So I'm trying to, like, even you sending me the form yesterday, it was really good to hone down put it in words, put it in writing, you know.
I do know, but you're doing great. I didn't mean to translate. I was just giving my perspective.
No, it's great. It's great.
Yeah. So listen, come here. It's fascinating stuff. It really is. And it's a gorgeous story. And thank you for sharing. So the work you do today, Páisti in businesses one-on-one, have you a preferred space to work in?
Yeah. So it's been, in a way, like we all have gifts of COVID. You know, there's been terrible sadness and people losing people and job losses and insecurity, and I'm honouring all of that. And that's been really hard. But it's a bit like what I said yesterday when Colm asked me to fill the form out. I always have these role models like Edith Edgar, who's a survivor of the Holocaust. She wrote her first book at 91. Her back was broken by a Nazi. She was a professional ballet dancer, and you know, she's living alongside her trauma as a 90-something-year-old today. So I suppose, Colm, you're asking me so through COVID, basically, a lot of my work went online. I've had some clients for many years that have worked online because they may have worked with me in Ireland and then they've moved internationally and they just want to continue their work. So it had developed, but it's developed even more now, and the work has, sometimes it's even better for people to work online because where they're at, it's quite stressful sitting with someone, so they like talking on the phone. And just, it's a bit like psychoanalysis for them. You know, they just want someone to be there, and I'm professionally keeping them guided, like Colm is keeping me guided on the boundary of the coffee at 11. So it's been going off the radar well. And then I suppose there's other opportunities that have opened. I love one-to-one work. I love, I suppose, seeing people that have been on the floor that like literally are so caught up with their imposter syndrome, they're not even working. I have some people, really talented people, that because they know they're worth more than that as well, they're not actually able to work in their profession because they're so riddled with their anxiety. Seeing them then start to blossom, and you know, sometimes it takes longer than others, but it always happens. And I have that trust then. So then it's a bit like saying, take my hand, you know. They don't know, they're like, how is there piranha in the water? You know, it's like the metaphor, but I don't know, are you a good swimmer? You know, and all this, and it's like, you know, my confidence helps them to come with me, but they have to do the work. Like I can't, they have to put the effort in. But my plan going forward is to run kind of online programs. So like I've lots of ideas that I'm building on at the moment that I'm doing behind the scenes, you know, so it's very exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting, very exciting, and very beautiful, very beautiful. I love that phrase, you know, the way you described it there, take my hand, like, that's just gorgeous, because they're nervous as kittens, and you're sort of saying, you know what, look, you'll be fine. Right, just take my hand and I'll guide you a couple of steps. And, you know, you said it always works. Eventually it always works. So Boodle-bus to you. Boodle-bus to you. Lovely to have you here in the cafe today. We're going to go to Q&A or comment from the floor. I'm quite sure somebody will want to come in and interact with you in just a moment, Harriet. But if you wouldn't mind, what are you taking from COVID? What lesson or lessons are you taking from COVID? You know, not letting go of.
I'm taking that I know more. I know even more that I really like my own company. Like you were saying, what's something that, because I love drama and theatre, and I've had main parts and show. You know, I'm very sociable, and as much as that, I love very simple things like my walk and my dogs and my garden, and I don't really need to be in the razzle dazzle all the time. I'm happy to do that, and I enjoy it at times, but I wouldn't like to do that every day. I feel compassion actually for people who would have to live in that spotlight place all the time. So I'm taking that, and I'm taking how trusting that, like, it was really nice for my children to be off that kind of treadmill of education. I know that wouldn't necessarily be what everyone would agree with, but like the day my daughter finished school, she grew her nails. You know, she was learning more organically and doing her baking, and she loves sewing, and just, I suppose I'm taking that developing your emotional intelligence is the foundation, because I'm smart. I just know that when you're smart, if you have really good emotional intelligence, the world is your oyster. Like that, I believe, I'm a big advocate of. I wish that was pushed more in school as much as how someone writes. Like I often get the teachers coming to me about my son because he's quite a disorganized writer, but like there's no fear of him. But you know, it's like where we put the emphasis. I think having good emotional intelligence is just what we need. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we had more leaders like that?
Absolutely, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great? Beautiful sentiments. Thank you for that. And I love the way you bring it back to your own children and those very real examples, your daughter growing her nails and doing bacon and learning organically. The education system regrettably hasn't moved on in the state's history, really. It's still, you know, the 3 R's, and everybody gets measured on by the 1 yardstick, and of course that's not real. So I'd love to think that an education system over time will evolve where people get measured against a standard in their own area of brilliance, whatever that might be.
And in fairness, in support of teachers, there are a lot of teachers getting interested in the effects of trauma and how bad behaviour is actually trauma. And so it's growing. Like I do meet a lot of amazing teachers that follow me and they want to learn, but I agree with you, Colm. The system is still quite driven with, grading, and, so they're pushed up against, it's hard for teachers. They have a lot of pressure with note taking and trying to adhere to the inspector and the principal. But a good principal, like a good leader, a school can be run very holistically if there's a good leader, like anything really.
Really well said, really well said. And by the way, I agree with you. I think more and more teachers are coming into this space. There's an awakening happening. Perhaps, ironically, to do with the social media that in another sense can be somewhat damaging, but I think there's an awareness coming in. There's a whole cohort of younger teachers there that are much more aware than teachers back in the day. So maybe 100 years, maybe this is the 100-year work, maybe 100 years from now we'll zoom back in and see what it looks like. Maybe it'll have changed for the better. Come here, beautiful chat. Who'd like to come in and interact, ask a question, make a comment? Donald Thurlow, you're very welcome.
So resonates both the emotional intelligence bit, the Howard Gardner philosophy, and the bullying thing. It took me so many years, both a first headship and a couple of years into a second headship, to sort out the culture in the school. And it's the culture in the school, and structurally I had to change things. First rule, if any child could report bullying, either by a pupil or by a teacher, but they had to come with 4 others. And the secretaries knew if 5 kids lined up outside my door, that's what it was about, and they were let in almost straight away. And they were so good, and it changed the culture. But the second part of it, the bully was then sent for, and if I checked the facts, and if it was bullying, they were excluded for 3 days, no decision about it, and they were only readmitted to school if they came back in. The parents had to reapply for admission. So I had the bully and the parents, and we discussed it. And the other part of the whole structure was the whole school then started to accept this anti-bullying thing. And the other part of the therapy was they would boost the self-esteem of the child, of the victim. So if it was in PE, the child had been laughed at, couldn't get over the box or something, they'd start clapping if he got over it, and so on. So it was all those things. If the child wasn't particularly bright and answered a question, the rest of the class would go mad, great. And it was treating the parents as well, because when they came back to apply for the school, I would say, well, why did you exclude him? It was just no. There's a philosophy in this school, the rule of the community, and he is not, he's not following them. I want you to persuade him, and then I'll take him back. And it worked.
Beautiful. Harriet, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah. So Donald, you were principal of a school. Is that right?
Yes, in the UK.
Yes. Wow. So it's like you took it really seriously, and as you said that you saw the changes, because the kid then that was being bullied, you're giving him affirmations, you're getting everyone to get on board, and it's like, in a way, my hope is then when the parents went off that they reflected on how could that, because it's like it's two sides of a coin, that the bully is vulnerable as well because they're still only children, and it's like hoping that that child can get the support it needs, because often we take things out in school if there's kind of illness at home or poverty or separation or addiction, and we just kind of go for the weakest gazelle. So again, it's not, the bully isn't always, even though they do awful things, but if we can try and do the intervention, then it could hopefully, they could learn from it. Yeah.
Now, sorry, just the last point. One thing I did because I had a flexible budget, we appointed a school counsellor, a skilled helper, who had her own office and was in the school all day, every day. So
Brilliant.
Kids, if they didn't want to share something with me or another member of staff, could knock on her door, and anything they said inside that little office was confidential.
Lovely stuff. John, thank you for that. That was lovely intervention. And Harriet, nice to see the same conversation, if you like, across, I suppose, generations and across the water as well. So really interesting to hear. John, thank you for that. Princess Shelley, in your own time, please.
Hey Harriet, thank you very much for a great conversation. I've been moderating the comments that come into the cafe. I think you saw a few of them coming in early on. And it's always a really lovely way to catch the vibe in the cafe, very much like a real cafe. People are popping in and out, and earwigging and eavesdropping on conversations like we are, and we're listening to all the great stuff you're exchanging with Colm. So some lovely comments here. Janie Lazar of TEDx Dunleary was a previous guest on the show in recent weeks. Janie's popped in a few comments there, but she kicked it off today with she liked that you were listening early on to your inner moral compass and teaching children to acknowledge their feelings. And I saw a lot of people nodding in the cafe when you were talking about that there is a tendency sometimes to dismiss a level of that, you know. And Janie also liked when you said that every step is learning, not mistakes, but opportunity. So she liked that, and how learning to live with ourselves, knowing we can live with ourselves the way we are. So thanks for those lovely comments. And James popped in as well. Thanks for being here, James. And he said nothing is a mistake. So lots of support for what you're saying, Harriet. Lots and lots of lovely support. And Sandra Schmidt and Eamon both alluded to a book by Mark, I may be pronouncing it wrong, Mark Woolen. It Didn't Start With You, How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle. So have you come across that book, Harriet, or that
No,
read?
but it just sounds, I resonate with it. It sounds great.
So both Sandra and Eamon mentioned that, and I think Eamon has popped in a link to a YouTube talk on that. So anybody who likes that, you can have a little look at that. Janie went on to say, knowing we are enough is the one thing. It's feeling it and believing it is another thing. Knowing it is one, but actually living it is another. And to not losing sight of what feels like perhaps how and why many of us are, or how we're connected in some way to one another. So she liked what you said there as well. Thank you very much for that, Janie. And Kristen, who is part of our international cohort, she joins us in Malmo in Sweden each morning. She says, you are certainly giving a wonderful impression, and I would feel totally secure in your hands if you were my therapist. Isn't that lovely, Harriet? Such a lovely compliment, and thank you, Bridget, there for initiating the applause there. She says, if I'm not a mistake, you're a great thinker as well, and it clearly shows that you're a good listener with compassion, support and understanding, and thank you for sharing your story. So thank you for that comment, and Kristen, I think it's a lovely testimonial listening to the passion you have with your work, Harriet, and I think that's what Anne Kristen was referring to there as well. So I can see there that Eamon has popped in the links, Harriet, to your website and your Facebook and your Twitter and that kind of a thing. So some of our cafe audience may access you that way. And I also have some lovely comments there, as Eamon said that, as we've said before, the future is compassionate leadership. And that's been mentioned before as well. And you also said something that Eamon mentioned about how we show up for our children. So I appreciated you popping that in, and I wrote that down. We've all got these little notebooks here, Harriet. Where this is our little, it's like, I liken it to the Anne Frank diary. We've all got these notebooks, and when it's popped in like that, Eamon spots things and pops them in for us, and we've got these lovely notes. Harriet, thank you for a wonderful interview with Colm today, and especially thank you everybody for all your great comments, and not just your comments. I know some of you maybe can't comment, but you're nodding and you're laughing, and they are sometimes just as important to us and to the vibe in the cafe. Your nods, your laughs and all that kind of a thing. So thank you very much. And at this point, I'm going to pop you over to Mr. O'Brien. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Princess Shelley.
Isn't that a gorgeous part of the show, Harriet?
Absolutely. And yeah, it's like how we show up for ourselves is how we show up for our children. I mean, that's how we show up for ourselves is how we show up for our business. How we show up for ourselves is how we show up for our friends. How we show up for everything, you know? It's like, you know, Mahatma Gandhi, let it begin with me. How do you change the world? Let it begin with me. And our little bit, it's like we can get overwhelmed, you know, because there's so much news feed, but it's like our little bit can make little changes, big changes. I know it from how I see my children thriving and even family. And, you know, the more we come into our light, it's like, you know, when Nelson Mandela was ordained, you know, when he was inaugurated president, you know, he used Marianne Williamson's words. They're also words that I always try and live by. You're not afraid of your darkness. You're actually more afraid of your light. Who are you to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, famous? Actually, who are you not to be? You're a child of the universe. Your playing small does nothing to serve anyone. So if I went into those kids going, oh, I hate my life, I hate myself, I'm just such a waste of time, they're just going to be like, right, and how is that helping us? Whereas I go in and I tell them I love who I am, I love being alive, and this is how I did it, and this is where I've come from, and this is how I was mean, and this is, I didn't like that, I didn't feel good. And then they're like, yeah, I don't feel good actually doing that either. And they, you know, so actually my vulnerability is a strength, because it gets them to, you know, be kinder, really, you know, and it's important. It's not just fluffy. You know, sometimes it's so sweet what you do. It's not sweet. It's really important. And also it's like the whole thing about, it's not about being a doormat either. We can be compassionate, but it's really okay to, you know, keep away from the wrong people, you know, and wish them well and hope they get what they need.
Beautiful. That's just a gorgeous, gorgeous way to finish the conversation. That was just beautiful. You know, Princess Shelley comes in and shares the sentiment of what's been going on in the cafe. And it's just, it really is a lovely part, because I'm fully involved in the conversation. So I get to hear everybody's take on it. And I've always said, everybody in the cafe has heard the same words. You said the same words to us all, but we all listened with different ears from where we are in our lives. And that's what we're reflecting back in the comments. So folks, one and all, thank you for being here this morning and brightening up the start to our week. All of us. Folks, before we let you go, before we let Harriet go, let me tell you what's happening in the cafe tomorrow on the Coffee at 11 show. A young man coming in tomorrow, he's only 28 years of age, and he was training to be an international rugby player. So that'll give you a measure of the guy, right? He was trying to be an international rugby player. He won't be an international rugby player because at age 18, he had a heart attack on the playing field. So he survived that. Obviously, he's 28 now, and he's passionate about young people's health and lots of other stuff besides. So he's going to come into us tomorrow. His name is Mark Maxwell. So if you have time, come in and listen to Mark's story. It'll get another fascinating conversation on the Coffee at 11 show. So I'd like to thank Princess Shelley for doing an amazing job. Yes, indeed, Princess Shelley. Heart emoji there. Eamon Smith, thank you very much indeed, aka the Monk, for keeping us safe and secure. The lovely Katrina O'Brien is not with us this morning for making this beautiful topic and telling it later on, for sharing out. And of course, wigwam.ie, SME peer support for their ongoing support. And finally, it leaves me to just finish the show by saying, Harriet McGuigan, namaste.
Namaste to all of you, and just thank you for the support and supporting yourselves, really. I suppose what you all resonated with is that self-love that you all have. And I'm so glad you've had the coffee at 11.